And finally, what royal revelations appeared in Omid Scobie's EndGame that led to the book being quickly removed from the shops on the day of its release? Alexander Larman joins me now with the story. Alexander, thanks for joining Spectator TV. The Royals have been back in the news this week with the release of royal correspondent Omid Scobie's new book. It quickly had to be removed from the bookshelves in the Netherlands. Tell us what happened there.
Well, the trouble is, James, is that as luck would have it, there was this translation of Omid Scobie, and I think calling him a royal correspondent, putting it a bit strongly, his new book, EndGame, came out. And what's very interesting is that in the English version, Omid, as we must call him, reveals that there are two members of the royal family who were the racist royals, who apparently, when Meghan was pregnant with her first child by Prince Harry, asked what skin colour the baby was likely to be. Now, Omid claims that he knows who these people are, but he can't possibly say who they are because of UK laws. But obviously, in Holland, you don't have UK laws, so as luck would have it, this translation that has appeared has the names of the two people involved. So what's happened is that the Dutch publisher has pulled these titles off the shelves and said, oh no, we couldn't possibly have meant to say that. But of course, all the proof copies have already gone out to all the editors and reviewers and bloggers. So every single person in a position of public influence in Holland who've been sent a copy of the book will now know the identities of these two people. And it's hilarious because Scobie gave an interview to Dutch television in which he said, well, my version of the book doesn't have any of this information in it. And you're thinking, what do you mean, your version of a book? I mean, are there about 10 different versions that exist whereby your version is just one of them? And it's hilarious, really, because you can imagine this idea that, Camp Sussex has a dozen people out there just like Scobie, and that he's this he's not so much one person, there's about 10 of them. So, I mean, all lightheartedness aside, what you have to see is that there is clearly something happening from Camp Sussex, and that, I mean, Meghan especially has been quite quiet this year because Harry had Spare, he's had all the publicity around that, and he's had Invictus. But, I mean, all we've really heard about her is this stuff about will she be making a cameo in the last season of Suits and stuff like that. And I think one thing we've seen over the last half-decade is that Meghan Markle is not a woman who doesn't like publicity. So what you start to think to yourself is she going to be doing something via intermediaries which is going to get her side of the story back out there? And obviously the biggest detail from the Oprah Winfrey interview that she and Harry did in 2021 was to hint about the idea of this racist member of the royal family. And the fact that Scobie has put this detail into the book with this added bonus name means that we have to wonder, well, how exactly has some translator in Holland decided, I know, I'm going to create the biggest royal news story of the year for fun? And none of it's adding up. And a lot of what's going on means that they're treating you, me, and the average person on the street like idiots. And I think what we have to be asking is, there is an agenda, and whose agenda is it, and what exactly is going on?
Well, talk about, speaking your truth, giving one-sided accounts. What are the other main claims in this new book? Obviously, the racist royal one is the one that's dominated the headlines, but I just wondered, from what we've heard and seen so far, are we expecting more of those kind of revelations, or is it sort of a one headline fact story?
Well, what was interesting for me is when I saw the first stories of the book, I thought, there's nothing new here. I mean, Prince William wants to be king. Princess Kate is quite amenable and she's quite tame compared to Meghan and Diana. There are tensions between William and Harry. And I just kept thinking, everybody knows all this stuff. I mean, literally nothing that I saw the first weekend's revelations was of the slightest surprise to me. And I think that what Scobie and his publishers may have done is a kind of dead cat strategy, because Finding Freedom, which was a rubbish book, which Scobie wrote a few years ago about Harry and Meghan escaping from the cruel confines of the royal family, it was a massive bestseller, because what we're not used to in this country is the idea that we write books about the royal family which are not hagiographies, which are just straightforward muckraking gossip. And I think that the fact that the book was very critical of the royal family and also very, very flattering about Harry and Meghan meant that there was a market for that. And so the publishers have decided that EndGame, which I thought would have nothing to do with the Beckett play, but Scobie quotes the Beckett play at the end. So you see, he's an intellectual as well as everything else, which is really, really flattering. I think that the trouble that we now have is that, I mean, what's going to come that's new? And you see, if you name the racist members of the royal family, the Dutch translation of the book, so that it helpfully goes viral the week of publication, so that when it eventually comes out, it gives you all the credit and all the story that you couldn't have put in the UK. I mean, it's clever. It's cynical and it's Machiavellian, but it's clever. And I just don't know who it's coming from. Is it coming from his publicists, in which case, give him all the raise? Is it coming from Scobie, in which case, give him a knighthood? Or, as is more likely, is it coming from this couple who have, a huge amount of power? I mean, they've got deals with these. I mean, okay, the deals are slowly dwindling away because nobody watched the Netflix series, nobody listened to the Apple podcasts or Spotify podcasts. But nonetheless, you're talking about a huge amount of influence. And so, no, I cannot believe that any of this is coincidental or accidental.
Yeah, you mentioned there in your sort of answer there the nature of diminishing returns. And frankly, how much is there a public appetite? A few years ago, of course, there was Finding Freedom. But having heard so much from Harry and Meghan and the wider camp, Sussex, etc., about what went on during the years they were active royals, I mean, is there now a sense perhaps that interest has waned in all of this, hence why perhaps we're seeing now Meghan and Harry keeping a slightly more dignified silence in the hope that they could be readmitted to the fold?
I think dignified silence is putting it a bit strongly. I think it's more you send in your attack dog and you're standing on the side and you're placing bets on what your attack dog's going to do. But no, I think that the question that I have is that, a couple of weeks ago, there was all this story briefed to press in great detail about the reconciliation between Harry and King Charles. And then also, in the same breath, the idea that William and Harry, there is no reconciliation and the two are forever estranged. And what I want to know, I mean, I'm fascinated by all this. I mean, I'm literally your equivalent of your popcorn munching punter, is what is going to, I mean, quite literally, what is the end game here? Because I think Harry has done more damage to the royal family than anybody since Edward VIII. He's probably done more damage than Edward VIII as well, because at least with Edward VIII, when he became Duke of Windsor, he just packed him off to the Bahamas and made him irrelevant. Whereas Harry in California, he's still this figure of international fascination. And, I mean, while I don't think he's particularly clever, Meghan is clever, and you can see that between the two of them, you are working towards this solution, which I think is nothing less than the demolition of the royal family as it stands. And in Scobie, they found a very useful Boswells of their collective Johnsons, who is very happy to give them what they want. And I think it's both sinister and also fascinating, because ultimately Republicans everywhere are going to be rejoicing at EndGame, because they're going to see this book as the absolute vindication of what they've been saying for years. But for the rest of us, you just think to yourself, well, are the royal family really that awful? Are they really the David Icke incarnation of them as, cheese-eating lizards or whatever Icke says these days? Or are they, in fact, flawed human beings who are placed on the international stage and be given far more scrutiny than any of us would ever like? And thus their flaws are magnified far beyond what they actually are.
Alexander, thank you so much for joining us on Spectator TV today.